Right, this week's Sky Cricket podcast being recorded 2 days before the third and final Test match in Rawalpindi. We're having to do it over StreamYard or Zoom because Nas still doing his Phileas Fogg impression. You're in Dubai. I'm here in Islamabad, keeping an eye on England and their preparations, and Pakistan, of course. But let's start with you, first of all, because you were there at the Women's World Cup final. You were on comms. First of all, the occasion, was it a good and fitting occasion to finish off the tournament?
It was. It was a really good occasion. There was a good crowd in, over 20,000 in, two very good sides, deserving of being in the final, and a final of the highest quality, really. In a tournament that's seen a lot of drop catches, and I think it was nearly 100 drop catches. I thought the fielding and the athleticism and the standard was excellent, and the best side won. And it's a great story, really, with New Zealand having gone into the tournament, having lost their last 10 games leading up to the tournament, and no one was giving them a chance, including me, who went for the classic England-Australia final.
There they are. You brought that up because I wasn't going to wait too long. I mean, your prognostications just
whatever that means
off the mark. Predictions for you. England and Australia, your predictions, neither of them anywhere near. Were New Zealand worthy winners then in the end?
They were. I mean, I guess you have to look into those stats. The 10 games they lost were against England and Australia, two of the best sides in the world. And I guess you learn a lot from losing against such quality sides. Sometimes in the women's game in particular, the difference in standard between certain sides, you win, and you don't learn a lot if you're playing down the rankings opposition. But if you're playing like England and Australia, I think you find out a lot about yourself and what needs to be done going into a tournament. We all know also tournament cricket is different from bilateral cricket, and also the format, T20 format. You need to just get on a run. If you can get on a run, they hammered India in the first game here in Dubai, absolutely walloped them. And they didn't look back. They lost just one game to Australia. They also, the conditions, they have batters who play spin very well and a good spin attack. Mealy Kerr, player of the final, player of the tournament, absolute standout cricketer. She's going to be a superstar for years to come.
I mean, I guess it's similar, isn't it? That everybody says before 50 over World Cups that your bilateral form running into a tournament is really important. That generally at the longer form of the game, the best sides will win more often or form will come out on top. But in T20, that's less relevant, and tournament play, as you say, once you start to get on a roll, you can end up where New Zealand eventually ended up.
Yeah, and obviously your chances increase if Australia are knocked out in a semi-final. They have been the perennial winners of everything, serial winners of everything, which I'm not sure is great for the game. So it was nice to have a new name, a new country on the trophy. There were some good scenes, some emotional scenes there at the end with two or three of their senior players probably playing in their last World Cup. Leah Tahuhu, Susie Bates, and Sophie Devine definitely not captaining anymore. Some nice scenes at the end when everyone had left and they were out with Mealy Kerr on a guitar and singing away. I think they grabbed their opportunity, and a side like England, who have played really well in bilateral cricket leading up to that World Cup, will see it as a missed opportunity. With Australia not there, they've waited all this time for Australia to falter, and they faltered themselves.
Now, not content with commentating on every game that's broadcast in any country all over the world, you were also helping induct Alistair Cook into the ICC Hall of Fame. Did you find any nice things to say about your old mate from Essex?
Well, I've just literally come up from the pool area. Cookie's just basically come out on a freebie trip to Dubai with his family. So they're all around by the pool right now. It was nice seeing my old Essex teammate. I tried to drag out the story. I sat next to him at the dinner and I said I was going to give the old story of Keith Fletcher walking around Colchester in a second team game and Fletcher criticising my batting and telling me that Alistair Cook was going to be the greatest player of all time for England anyway. So Cookie said, don't say that.
It's not funny when you told it the first time. About the 355th time, it's even less funny.
Well, it's not funny. It's not a gag. It's just a true story. As with Graham Thorpe, Keith Fletcher had a very good eye on players. And when Alistair Cook was playing in the second team for Essex, he said he would be one of England's finest ever players, and he was. So it was a nice dinner. He got inducted into the Hall of Fame. It was nice catching up with him. What have you been up to while I've been busy working? What have you been doing in Multan, Islamabad, and Rawalpindi?
So came up from Multan, obviously the day after the game, which was a scheduled 5th day. I managed to catch a flight with the England team, actually, which saved a 9-hour drive or a 7-hour drive, became a 40-minute flight. So that was useful, although the bags came on the bus like 9 hours later. So I didn't get the bags until the following evening. But our bus driver, who you know well, had that lengthy drive, and he was sent on a detour via Lahore as well, the poor lad. So he was in need of a break. Just going back to the Hall of Fame, you're not in it, are you?
I'm nowhere near that was the closest I've ever come to a Hall of Fame. I didn't see your name on the list either, to be honest. So.
A good week then for New Zealand cricket, because not only did their women become deserved World Cup champions, their men won their first Test match in India for a long time. They turned over India in the first game in Bengaluru. What do we make of that game? 46 all out. Let's start with India's 46 all out before you nail me on England's 46 all out 30 years ago. One thing that interested me, Rohit owned up. They obviously, both captains wanted to bat first, amazingly, after all that rain and pitch under covers and stuff. But Rohit owned up. He said, got it wrong. But I wondered why there's, you're a captain who shoved aside in memorably at Brisbane 20 odd years ago, and they got 400 on the first day or something. And you've been nailed for it ever since. But when a captain bats first and it goes wrong, it doesn't seem to attract that level of criticism, does it?
Well, not yet. I mean, Rohit hasn't worked with Ian Botham, David Gower, Paul Allott, Bumble, Ward, Butcher. Every time any toss decision goes awry, my name and Brisbane. So it's become like folklore anywhere around the world. Any game that's not going quite right with the toss, my phone and my Twitter goes off. Well, he's done a Nasser, hasn't he? I got it the other day. Rohit's done a Nasser, but in reverse. I guess with me, 390 for 2 in an Ashes game, first day, first morning, after all the build-up of the Ashes. You're out there so long, you're exposed to it for much longer. If you're 45 all out, 46 all out, you leave the pitch pretty quickly. Rohit said he'd bat first. Tom Latham, New Zealand captain, said he would have batted first. So I like skippers that sort of own up and don't make excuses. Something me and Rohit have got in common, actually. Both me and Rohit just immediately. I knew within an hour in Brisbane this was a complete mess up, and I think Rohit probably knew as well as wickets were tumbling. So yeah, a very good week. Now on to you. I mean, I noticed you've written about it, 46 all out. What a schmozzle that was. And I couldn't get in the side after that. The next game, your spare batter, I still couldn't get a game.
Not good enough, even though we were 46 all out. It brought back some classic memories, actually. I mean, you'd remember the Queen's Park Oval, fantastic ground in the day. England haven't played Test cricket there for a long, long time, since 2009. I think it's not really on the roster now for England fans, but it's a great ground, beautiful ground, very atmospheric. And the cricket in that hour that Curtly Ambrose blowed us away was, amongst the most dramatic any of us can have seen or played in. 8 down in 15 overs in an hour, basically, on that evening. So I just remember a couple of things stuck in my mind. One was Gus Fraser, who, when we were about 2 down, decided to go for a roti and get out of the changing room. He made it kind of halfway to the roti hut, by which stage he was 6 down, and he had to turn back and get his pads on pretty sharpish. And yeah, amazing hour of cricket. What a bowler Ambrose was.
I remember Thorpe walking off. And there was our street fighter, and he was up for a battle. That was his classic situation, and he had his stumps knocked out of the ground. And usually you look back at the stumps or the bowler, or you shake your head. He had those sort of glazed over eyes, just staring into the distance, and it sort of summed up where we were as a team. We had, like I say, you didn't pick me after that, but we went on to Barbados and won, didn't we? Didn't we win in Barbados?
We did. Myself and Alec on a few for the first inning. Stewie, actually, as you remember, got hundreds in both innings. But I do remember lots of Barmy Army in Barbados. I remember the kind of crowd erupted when we got to 47, and Stewie looked at me a bit quizzically. Why are they clapping 47? One more than last week.
Well, let's hope India fans will be hoping that the same result. They did. They fought back from Adelaide, didn't they, when they were bowled out cheaply in India, Australia.
That was the thing about our 46. It was so unusual. I think England had only been bowled out for below 50 once before, like 130 years before that, or 110 years before that. This 46 comes on the back of 36, which was only 4 years ago. I kind of looked at the numbers a little bit. Scores below 50 are twice as frequent in the last 20 years. There's 8 of them in the last 20 years compared to only 5, I think, in the 6 decades before that. So I just wondered whether implosions are more likely now. The default kind of response to a pitch doing a bit is to go harder. You know, it's like you never hear a captain or a coach say anything else other than, we're going to go harder. We're going to try and put the pressure back on the opposition. We're going to counter-attack, which is a perfectly logical response, by the way. I'm not criticizing the response, but the consequence of that might be just that lower scores of that nature that were once regarded as completely, out of the ordinary might become a little bit more likely. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that is right. I mean, you have to work with Morgs, Owen Morgan. Anytime England are collapsing in a white ball game, his default setting is we've got to go harder next time. Whereas me and you, the two old fogies, will say, well, how about trying to grind out a score? There's other reasons, aren't there? There's also pitch preparation. There's drainage. That game at Bengaluru, it rained the whole 2 days before. And in the old times, you may not have started. You may have had a day for the sun to get to it and be a bit flatter. There are things which are more challenging maybe nowadays for the batters, but also with the abundance of white ball cricket, people do just go harder. That is, they feel they back themselves to hit them out.
Can you envisage any situation in the modern game where a captain or a coach might say, let's not go harder. Let's try and just get over this little period and wear a team down? I mean, you just can't see it happening, can you, so much?
I think you probably would with certain individuals. If I'm coach or captain of Joe Root, I'd expect Joe just to play like Joe has done for, over a decade now. So you wouldn't want him to be trying to play like Duckett or Crawley or whatever. Basically, we want someone to do the whole reason of this chat. I've just worked it out. We want to get back to Johannesburg and Atherton. Is that what Test cricket needs? Atherton grinding it out for 2 days and blocking with Jack Russell for a draw for 2 days.
It doesn't need any of that, let me tell you. And we won't go back to those days, which is my point, really, that there is although I think the beauty of Test cricket actually is that it doesn't necessarily need to be a one-size-fits-all solution. I think there are times when you can be a bit more nuanced in your approach.
And anyway, on the back of that, let's go to Multan and go back before we look forward. What did you think of that?
The last 8 wickets fell in 20 overs on that day, and there was barely a defensive shot to be seen, albeit in completely extreme circumstances, day 9 pitch. And England's mantra is the more extreme the conditions, in fact, the more aggressive their response will try and be.
Yeah, I think some people focused in on that, and you could argue they went too many sweep shots. You can make arguments about how their tempo of that last day or what ended up being the last day. The two other areas, really, if you analyse it deeply, and where England would analyse it, hopefully, would be the first innings collapse when they could have had a lead of 75 and ended up having a deficit of 75. Now, that is a massive, on a pitch is going to deteriorate. That leaves you a lot of area to make up. And the catching in that 1 over, really, the catching of Jamie Smith, who had kept brilliantly for 2 days, dropped an absolute dolly that he would catch 999 times out of 1,000. And Joe Root, close in a second, third slip, dropped that one. And it meant, that Pakistan got a lead that England were never going to chase down on that last day.
Just a bit of reflection on Pakistan, actually, because we were critical of things that had been happening, and all the kind of slight chaos and changes behind the scenes. And quite a lot of us were grinning away the day before that test, because when we were there that day before, if you remember, they had a very visible selection meeting right out in the middle, and there was about, like, I don't know, 8 of them there, and hands waving and all kind of histrionics, and everybody just looked at it and thought, well, what chaos next? But of course they made some decisions, took a gamble on the pitch, took a gamble on the team, took a gamble on the toss. I mean, it was a kind of all-in gamble, really, on a modest poker hand, if you want to put it that way, in terms of the team, because if the toss had gone against them, it might have been hard work. But all the gambles paid off, and relief for Shan Masood. It would be difficult, I think, to have come back from another defeat, 7 defeats on the bounce, and if they'd have thrown away a strong position in that game. But that's bought him some time.
It has, and it's obviously also set up the series beautifully. And it was a toss they needed to win, let's be honest. If you go in with that side with one seamer and a side low in confidence, I think it was an important toss, not a game-changing toss, but it was important. And I was thinking, we had a rouge, didn't we? We had a rouge on before we even set out to Pakistan. And I asked her, what pitches suit Pakistan? Their pace bowling is a little bit short of fire at the moment, simply because they've got niggles and they're short of speeds are down. Their batting struggles when it is a bit of a green top. Spinning pitches, can they prepare spinning pitches? And the first one they actually do prepare that spins, you look at their spinners that played, and the 2 of them in particular, bowl beautifully. And then that puts England under pressure, and Bazball, if you like to call it, under pressure on spinning surfaces. It puts England's spinners under a bit of pressure. Can they deliver? So I think they found a formula. I don't think it can be a long-term plan to play on used pitches with fans that will come onto the pitch with fans at each ends and patio heaters and everything. But what do you think? Is it a little chink in Bazball's armour?
Oh, yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Is it Bazball's kryptonite? I don't know. I mean, I was looking at the numbers for England. They played a lot of cricket in Asia in the last 4 years. Since 2021, they played 16 test matches in Asia, 9 in India, 5 in Pakistan, and 2 in Sri Lanka. They've won 8 and lost 8. Some of those a little bit before Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum took over. But some of the defeats of late under those 2 have come on pitches that have spun quite significantly, the 4 in India and the 1 here in Multan. So you could certainly see why Pakistan are desperate. I think the thing with Bazball is that the batters love flat pitches, the likes of Harry Brook. I'm not saying they're flat pitch only players, but what I'm saying is that on pitches that don't do a lot, they score at such an unbelievable rate. Rawalpindi last time, we'll come on to Rawalpindi in a minute, but Pindi last time 2 years ago, they scored 575 overs on the first day. It's an astonishing scoring rate. So it buys so much time, it puts so much time into the game. Obviously, on pitches that do a little bit more, that kind of scoring rate is not always achievable. And therefore, they lose one of their, I suppose, what you might call super strengths. One of their super strengths as a team is their ability to really score quickly. And that is negated a little bit on pitches that do a bit more. And obviously, when you come to this part of the world generally, if they're going to do a bit more, it's going to be spin. So you can certainly see why Pakistan want to produce a turning pitch. Just before we leave Multana, quick shout out to Stu Forster, the Getty Images photographer. That shot of Ben Stokes in the second innings when he got out, where his bat.
How long did it take you to find the bat on the photo?
Well, I missed it, first of all. I looked at that picture and I thought, well, that's a good picture. Stokes has not got his bat in his hand. He's about to be stumped. And then I realized that there was this little bat in the furthest left-hand corner of the photograph. I mean, I couldn't throw the bat that far, basically. And it shows
couldn't hit the ball that far.
Couldn't hit the ball that far. It shows you how hard Stokes tried to hit that ball. The bat went on this, unbelievable arc. And Stu, I was chatting to him yesterday, had his fixed camera on a very wide setting, and that meant that he got it just at the furthest point of the parabola. It was a fantastic photo.
All those dinners you go to and win awards and stuff, they do a sports photo of the year. I mean, that must be.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Wisdom Photo of the Year, which is quite a nice award. He's got to be in with a chance for that photograph. It's an absolute corker. So well done to him. So here in Pindi, so I was there this morning. So this is 2 days out. Fans were on the pitch. Obviously, it's uncovered. They've left it uncovered during the daytime to get the heat on it.
What do you make of it? What you were every morning in Multan, you marched out to the middle and sort of did your guru pitch inspection and came back and finally said, after 8 days there, finally said it's going to turn. What have you made of this one?
I think it'll be a pretty good pitch, for a day or two. I mean, clearly they're trying to make it spin. Obviously, that goes without saying. They're trying to bake it. They want it to spin. But I think it's not going to be so easy. Pindi has got the reputation of being one of the flattest pitches of any ground. Clearly, they can't. It's not a used pitch. They can't do what they did in Multan and play a game that starts effectively on the 6th day. It is going to spin at some stage, I'm sure, but I think it's going to be a pretty good pitch for maybe the first half of the game. Going back to the more traditional type of cricket here, where, the game goes along almost normally for 2 or 3 days, and then eventually things start to happen. So, yeah, I mean, we'll wait and see. It's a bit of guesswork, but England's, they obviously feel it's going to spin because they changed the balance of their side. They announced straight away this morning that Rayan Ahmed is in the side, Gus Atkinson is back, and Kars and Potts miss out. Kars has bowled really well. He's got a bit of a bruised heel, but he's fit to play, and I just think they're resting him after 2 tough games, and obviously they're changing the balance of the side. So Rayan Ahmed, who's not played since Rajkot in the India tour in terms of Test cricket, only took 13 wickets at 60s, I think, for Leicestershire this summer. But this is why he's here. He's here for this reason, isn't he, as the third spinner? And they obviously feel his time is right.
Well, I mean, they see him as a third spinner. They don't see him as a second spinner. Obviously, his batting is more than useful. We've seen that on a number of occasions. I guess it's also a win the toss sort of selection, because then if you don't, Stokes may, I don't know how fit Stokes is. He had his hamstring heavily strapped on day 2, but he said after the game he was fine. So just having some extra days in the field and running around, he feels he can do more bowling. I think that's just fresh legs as well with Kars and Potts. Atkinson comes in having been rested and rotated. So again, with that side, as with the Pakistan side in the last game, it's an important toss to win. Any thoughts on the Pakistan side? Have they made it, from what you've seen, same balance, or do they need to bring the seamer in?
I hadn't heard any. By the time we left the ground, which was about 1 o'clock, I hadn't heard anything. I mean, I'd have thought they might bring in an extra seamer, funnily enough, for the leggy Zahid, who hardly bowled. But, I mean, who knows? The other thing about England's selection, and this may negate what I've just said about Pakistan, is that, unlike in Multan, there are no cut strips either side of the pitch. So there's the pitch, which is as white as your bald head right now. And then there's just lush green grass on the square and a lush outfield. So there is absolutely no chance of any reverse swing. And I think that, as much as the pitch actually, is what has encouraged England to play the extra spinner at the expense of the seamer. I just don't think there's going to be any reverse swing. So that's different from the last test in Multan, for sure.
I mean, last time we were there, it was a famous victory, wasn't it? Right at the end, 4:36. Jack Leach got the LBW. They're all scared, looking at the big screen for the review. Jack's been speaking between tests, and that's the thing as well that's come out about, again, the skipper, Ben Stokes. We've touched on him a few times, but about his empathy and his emotional intelligence on 2 forms, actually. The first one, he chatted to you and Wardy at the end of the test, and he spoke about how he had to apologise to the team for losing the plot for 15 minutes. What did you make of that, coming from a bloke here that never apologised to his team for losing the plot? And also the fact that he rang Jack Leach up when Shoaib Bashir got that fifer against the West Indies at Trent Bridge. The first person that Ben Stokes thought of was Jack Leach. What did you think of those two things that Stokes did and said?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised by him ringing Jack Leach. I think you use the word emotional intelligence. I think that's what he's got, and empathy with players, and clearly with Bashir becoming the first choice spinner, doing well, he's thinking, well, what's the other bloke thinking? And I might need the other bloke in six months' time or a few months' time, because we're going to Pakistan. I'll need more than one spinner. So that's all very smart and sensible. Me and you both lost the plot on far more occasions and far more, disastrously than Stokes did the other day, which basically, as far as I could see, was a show of frustration, to himself. And he didn't shout at the players or whatever. Nobody drops catches on purpose, but it was a critical moment, the moment when the game slipped away. So I didn't feel what he did was, deserving of an apology at all. But I guess it shows something of the way this team tries to go about it. The days of Brodie and Jimmy swearing and shouting at fielders when they misfield are long gone. So yeah, we'll see what that brings. 2 days out from the Test match, and it should be a cracker. As you said, the Pindi game last 2 years ago, was one of the great victories. Really, 500 on the first day, bold declaration from Stokes, who's as good as his word, saying we're prepared to lose to win, and then winning it right at the end of the game. A very memorable game. Just a couple of other things. Kagiso Rabada came to 300 wickets, took his 300th wickets in this Test match. And the noticeable thing was how quickly he did so, actually. I think in terms of balls bowled, he's the quickest to get there, which is a remarkable effort from him. I mean, he's somebody I remember we were there right at the start of his career, one of the early series against England, when he burst onto the scene. I remember Michael Holding saying this kid's going to be a fantastic fast bowler for a long period of time. But, what was it, 11,817 balls to get to 300 wickets. And South Africa have produced some fantastic fast bowlers, haven't they? Since readmission, you'd say they've probably produced more great fast bowlers than any other nation, if you think about it.
You're a product of your environment. And for all the stats I saw this week about the best places to bat, and Pindi was at the top, there was a couple that are difficult to bat. I think Cape Town and Joburg actually were a couple that zip around. And obviously South Africa have got a history of producing fast bowlers. I love the passion of Rabada. It has at times got him in trouble. We were there in Port Elizabeth when he was celebrating.
You had that argument with Mr. Stubborn, Mikey.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have an argument. He just stared. He just shouted at me, basically, Mikey. So he has a real passion, doesn't he, Kagiso Rabada? He has a lovely action. Great to see. Hopefully, he'll carry on and get many more wickets, because like I said the other day in the Test match, why I enjoyed the pitch it's spinning. There's two great things when you watch a fast bowler run. I saw today on Twitter, there was someone who put Malcolm Marshall's 6-foot against England all those years ago, and he was just a joy to watch as long as you weren't facing him. So spin and raw pace like Rabada or Marshall or whatever is a joy to watch. So any other news touch on the white ball side?
Yeah, that's the other announcement this week. No Josh Butler for the start of England's white ball squad. So I mean, it's a long time since he's played now. I mean, he's not an old man, obviously. One assumes he'll get over this injury, but calf injuries are a bit of a nightmare to get over, because you're just not quite sure how soon and how quickly to push it. I've done my calf running. I'm sure you have. And when you're our age, it's much more difficult to get over. But there's still that.
It's an old man's. They call it an old man's injury, don't they? The calf.
Exactly. I chatted to Jimmy Anderson yesterday. I bumped into Jimmy in the team hotel, talking about that 2019 Ashes, when he went in the calf. He tried to come back. He went in the calf again, and he just said in the end he stopped running. He just did his fitness on the bike until he was absolutely 100% sure, through scans and everything, that he got over it and gradually started to come back. And the danger is you come back a bit too soon, you do it again, and then you're back to square one. So Joss hasn't played since that semi-final, has he, in Georgetown in the T20 World Cup, which is back in June now. So that's a long and lengthy.
Which tends to suggest he's been trying to come back and just niggling it every time. And then you can't. Once it's a niggle, you just can't do anything. So hopefully, I mean, England need him backfiring, and hopefully the break, actually, he'd have played so much cricket, if include IPL cricket or whatever, and he's got a young family, he's had so much time away from home. Actually thinking about it, if he does recover properly from it, it won't do him any harm, especially with a new coach coming in McCullum in the new year. McCullum won't be there, obviously, in the West Indies, but I think he'll do Butler a bit of good, refresh him for the challenges ahead. They made Livingston captain, which real turnaround, because Livingston in the summer was out of the 50-over side, and then he came back in because of injury, and now they've made him captain. So I hope he goes well.
More importantly, is Joss's replacement, Michael Pepper, Essex boy, of course, ferocious hitter of the ball, and will give rise to what is going to go down as a classic opening combination. Full salt and Michael Pepper. Salt and pepper.
Imagine Keezy. Imagine Keezy
taking the mick, isn't he, Keezy? He's just kind of thought, well, this is too good not to select this lad. So
yeah. No one will notice the results as long as we have salt and pepper at the top of the order. They'll be so focusing in with their gags. Let's have mustard at 3 and beer or whatever at 5. If Bumble was around, he'd be doing his condiments 11. So, no, he's a good player, though. More importantly, he's got 2 blast hundreds last summer for Essex and smashed it everywhere. He's a real good player, real talent. I guess the one that may have been on the radar, Tom Bantam, but I think he may still be injured from he had that football injury, didn't he, before the last game championship.
Sorry, Matt. Famous. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, so I think he's still injured, but we wish Pepper well and Joss on the way to recovery.
Cool, that's us. So you're flying in from Dubai tomorrow. I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Looking forward to the last test. Let's hope for another really interesting game as we had in Multan, and then we'll pod on the far side.